What's good, everybody? My name is Mr. Peters. Today, we're going to do a quick review on the quadratic equation and graph, and I'm going to give you an introduction into all those things and what they are. So, guys, understand the quadratic equation, right? What that means is that your equation is now going to have a x squared term. So we won't have 5x plus 5 is equal to something. Now what's going to happen is we're going to have an exponent in a power of 2, and the graph, instead of the graph being a straight line, is going to look like a U, which is called a parabola. So one thing I want you guys to understand, so that this could be an easy transition or easy topic, when they ask you for the zeros, the roots, or the solutions to the quadratic equation, please, I mean, not quadratic equation, to the formula or the equation, the same thing. When they ask you for the zeros, the roots, the solutions, they're asking you for the same exact thing. It's just different words. I have to let you know that. And what they're basically asking is they want us to factor this. And if we cannot factor it, that's when we use the quadratic formula. But we don't have to use the quadratic formula here. So what we're doing, right? We're talking about quadratics, and they said, hey, Mr. Peters, we need you to find the zeros to the solution to the quadratic equation. So I think about it, and it's the same thing as factoring polynomials, guys, right? We're looking for factors, numbers that when we multiply, they're going to give us 24, but when we add, we give this 10, right? So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to shorten that, right? Shorten that process. So we have 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 8 times 3, and 6 times 4. But I noticed that only 6 and 4 would work. So I go in and I have x plus 6 and x plus 4, right? That is what's going to give me that 10x when we add and that 24 when we multiply. So the trick here, guys, is that when you get your factors, you have to set them equal to 0. This is one of the biggest reasons why students get this wrong, because they will have the number right, but they will have the sign wrong. So when we're talking about quadratics, this is the difference with factoring, unless with the factoring they ask you for the zeros. You're going to set your factor equal to 0, and then you're going to solve. So whatever's in parentheses, you're going to drop the parentheses and put it equal to 0 and get x by itself. So my first 0 would be x is equal to -6, right? And then my second 0, when we look at this, we set it to 0. And once we start figuring it out, doing our steps, we're going to get x is equal to -4. So please, guys, just remember, when they ask you for the zeros, the roots, the solutions to the quadratic equation, they're asking you to factor it. And once you factor it, just make sure you set those factors equal to 0 and then solve. So right here, guys, this is what they wanted. This is what it means to find the zeros for the equation, okay? And before we go, what I want you guys to understand, we're going to go and we're going to look at a graph now. All right. So let's say we had a graph. So this is our graph on the test. We know the X, we know the Y. So now they ask us again, hey, Mr. Peters, find the solutions to the quadratic equation or to the graph, right? And what you guys have to know when we're talking about a graph, right, and they ask you for the solutions, what you are looking for is your x-intercepts, all right? So guys, please understand that when they ask you for the zeros to the quadratic equation, right, and they're talking about a graph, find the zeros, find the solutions, they're asking for the x-intercept. So once we go on this graph, here goes my first x-intercept. So we know x is equal to -2. That's our first 0. And then our other is going to be x is equal to 2. So remember, guys, I already knew about setting it to 0. So let's just say I did that, right? We have x plus 2, right? Because that's what it'll be, is equal to 0. And we have x minus 2 is equal to 0. So when we go and we figure everything out, guys, we know that we're going to get x is equal to -2 and x is equal to +2. Okay? So please just remember that, guys, when we're talking about the graph, all right? We are talking about where that U-shaped graph crosses the x-axis, okay? All right, so very last thing before we wrap this video up, but before I do that, man, if you liked this video and you found it helpful and real quick review, smash that like button for me, man. Drop some comments down below if you have any questions, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for future videos. But the last thing we want to do, we're going to be talking about the vertex. So let me just erase this right here. All right, so now we're talking about the vertex. So when we have an equation, what you're going to do, right? Like, let's say the equation we had, well, we'll skip that. So the vertex, guys, what you should know is that it's the turning point. We're going to stick to the graph. And what we mean by turning point, we're talking about either the lowest point on the graph or the highest. So here, we're talking about the lowest point, right? Because right here that I'm going to highlight with a blue dot, this would be our vertex, right? And basically what's going on is when we follow this graph, right? I'm switching to red. When we follow this graph, so we're coming way up here, these y's are right now getting smaller. And then once we get to this point right here, we notice that there's going to be a change in the values. So the y values are decreasing, going down. Then when we get to that blue dot, the lowest point on the graph, they're now going to start increasing. So please understand that is what a vertex is, all right? So I'm going to wrap this video up here today. If you found it helpful, guys, I'm going to do a second review on it for you next week. This is Mr. Peters. Thank you guys for joining us on our Quadratics intro video. Make sure you smash the like button for us. And thank you guys so much for the support. Hope you found the video helpful.